Welcome to the November 8th, 2021 Charleston County Planning Commission meeting. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting was noticed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. This commission acts in review and recommending capacity for comprehensive plan amendments, text amendments to the Charleston County Zoning and Land Development Regulations Ordinance, zonings, and plan developments. The commission has decision-making authority on road name change requests, public project reviews, appeals of administrative decisions, and final plats and subdivision matters, as well as other matters pursuant to Chapter 29, Title 6, Section 6-29-340 of the Code of Laws of South Carolina as amended. If you wish to speak at today's meeting, please fill out the sign-in sheet by the door. My name is Cindy Floyd. I'm the chair. For those of you who cannot see the nameplates, I will introduce the others. To my right, Tasha Gandy, Pete Pilatus, Marlena Davis. To my left, Warwick Jones, David Kent, and Suzanne Chavis. We also have Adam McConnell and Logan Davis. Logan is our newest member, this is his first meeting. Okay. He's a founding partner at Graves and Davis, where he focuses on business and real estate law. He's a graduate of Clemson University and the Charleston School of Law. Commissioner Davis is a native of the Charleston area and has interest in helping facilitate transportation and drainage improvements, as well as addressing the area's housing shortage and lack of affordability. Joel, would you please introduce the staff?
Sure. To my left, Andrew Millicent, the Deputy Director. To my right, we have Emily Piggott and Chelsea Dietrich. And I don't know if I have any other staff here. Don't see anybody else.
Okay. I would like to remind you that in order to get a good recording of the meeting for the minutes, please speak loudly and clearly into your microphones, because that includes me too, and not talk over one another. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the September 20th, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Was that you, Warwick?
Yes.
Okay. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Chavis,
Abstain. No, it's not him.
Commissioner Marlena Davis,
Yes.
Chair Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gandy,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Kent,
Yes.
Commissioner McConnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Pilatus, Commissioner Logan Davis.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is the director's remarks.
Sure. As you all may have heard, we passed the Zeldar with County Council. It was basically exactly the way it was presented and recommended by Planning Commission. Just two things that Council changed. The housing types with the duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. Instead of allowed by right, the Planning Commission, the County Council was more comfortable with allowing it with special exception approval as those applications would come in. Also, special exception for the parking reductions for affordable housing. If you recall, there was a slight parking reduction if you did affordable housing, and that was something that Council was more comfortable with that being special exception as well. So the affordable housing numbers and all stayed the same though. Yes, as you saw. Yes, sir.
So you say, what had to be a special exception? We couldn't have townhouses, or is that?
The housing types in our single-family detached that was the only thing that was allowed, and like the R4, for example, and in an attempt to allow more flexibility of units. We were saying, hey, if you meet the density, you can have these other housing types as well. But instead of by right, council passed it with special exception approval.
Any other questions? Okay. Last item on the agenda is approval of the 2022 Planning Commission schedule. I believe we were emailed those. Anybody? Did I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Chavis,
Aye.
Commissioner Marlena Davis,
Aye.
Chair Floyd, Commissioner Gandy, Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Kent, Commissioner McConnell,
Yes.
Logan Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Palatos. The ayes have it.
Being no further business, this meeting of the Charleston County Planning Commission stands adjourned. We will now begin the Planning Commission workshop.
Oh, sorry.
In the back.
Should I do the welcome thing? Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the November 8th, 2021 Charleston County Planning Commission workshop. This workshop has been noticed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. The first item on the agenda is a conceptual plan development presentation, Island Park Place Medical Health and Wellness Village, proposed on tax map number 203-00-00-48 and 203-00-00-053. Can continue with come forward with your presentation.
Afternoon. Thank you for having us today. My name is John Skirchak. I am the visionary and property owner behind this proposal for which you'll review today. My team has asked me to say a few words about myself, which I'll take a moment to do before I lay out this vision. My wife and I have a long-standing history here in the Low Country, particularly Johns Island. Our son is a Citadel grad, currently serving in the Marine Corps. We have two grandsons, which we're very proud of, the oldest of which we help with his autism. A few years ago, my mother was diagnosed with a red blood cell disease, and most of you might be aware of what autoimmune requires. It requires ongoing treatments, and in severe cases, blood transfusions. And in my mom's case, that happens to be frequent, about once a month. Right around the same time, my dad, who is an Air Force veteran, received the news that he was going to fight a very different battle, not one that was going to be overseas, but one that was going to be right here, and that was with cancer. And so I mentioned this today. My team wanted me to mention this because it's not to suggest that my family's hardships or their medical care is any more important than yours or your loved ones. The important point here is that my family lives on Johns Island, and so I have witnessed hands-on, daily and weekly, what it takes to get them the care that they need. And so over the years, I've talked to our neighbors, our friends, I've engaged the community, and what I come to realize is that I am not alone. Many people have this very same challenge on a daily basis. And so I decided to do something about it. I decided to set forth and create a vision that would allow medical health and wellness to come into harmony with one another to where our community can be served in one location. And oftentimes where medical procedures end on that day, that's where the various aspects of healthcare really starts. And it takes you through a long journey of treatment. It takes you through a long journey of health, wellness, education, preventative care, therapeutics. And that's what we envisioned here in Island Park Place, a health and wellness village that has a critical mass to attract the best practitioners, the best specialists in their fields to offer a better way of life for our community. In order to do this, I had to set forth and assemble a planning team, a design team, and an engineering team, professionals that understand that we need to preserve our culture and the values that we hold so dear to us for Johns Island. And so that team is led by Scott Parker with DesignWorks, which you'll hear from in a moment. Before I introduce him, I want to mention one other aspect, which is community outreach. So community outreach has been vitally important to us. And although we continue to work through COVID and we've been somewhat restrained, we really wanted someone from the community, someone that understood community outreach in a way that preserves the values of Johns Island, preserves the values of what this heritage means to us, and someone that has experience in this field. And so that someone is Miss Radia Baxter. She's here with us today. She'll talk after Scott about her plans to hold a community workshop and how she intends to go about that. And she is a Johns Island resident, mother of 3, is no stranger to the needs of what we have to bring forward to Johns Island, and we're happy she's here today. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Scott Parker.
Excuse me. Okay, great.
Thank you, John. Can you all hear me? So as John said, my name is Scott Parker. And when John first contacted me about the possibility of assisting him in realizing his vision, I must admit I listened with a level of apprehension. Having practiced planning and landscape architecture in Charleston for over 30 years, I have a very deep respect for the cultural and natural heritage of Johns Island, and I know how sensitive that is to our entire community. But as I heard John describe his vision, I realized that what he's proposing is the right thing for this location on Johns Island. And I also realized that he shares my respect for Johns Island. So let's start. So the first slide, if you all can see it, simply shows the location. So the proposed medical village is located along Betsy Carrison Parkway in the southern portion of Johns Island. It's outlined in blue on the image before you. You can also see the red line, hopefully, labeled the urban growth boundary. So you'll notice that the site is within the urban growth boundary, which is very important. The next slide is pulled from the Charleston County Comprehensive Plan. And you can see the area where the site is located. You can also see the line of the urban growth boundary, so confirming that the site is within that. And in the comp plan, the county calls for this to be urban-suburban mixed-use development. So what that means is that the plan envisions a mix of uses here that include goods and services for the nearby communities so that folks don't have to travel long distances. So this is solid and appropriate planning, in my opinion. The idea of reducing traffic on the sensitive rural roads of Johns Island by providing desired destinations close at hand. As we go in a little closer, again, the site that we're looking at is outlined in blue. The shaded area to the left or to the west and to the north are areas outside of the urban growth boundary. The areas that are not shaded are within the urban growth boundary. The existing zoning for the site is R4. Going a little closer to see your more immediate context of the site, Kiowa River Estates and the golf course is immediate to the east. Rosebank Farms is just across Betsy Carrison. The Greater St. John's AME Church is a little to the north, and the Church of Our Savior is a little to the south. The next map is an elevation map. So obviously this is very important. The really important work done in the Dutch dialogues identified the importance of building in areas where it's appropriate to build and not in areas where it's not appropriate to build. So you notice that about 50% of the site is at elevation between 11 and elevation 13, and the other 50% of the site is roughly elevation 13 to elevation 17. The entire site is in a FEMA shaded X zone. A little more of the characteristics of the site. There are some non-jurisdictional wetlands, which are shaded blue. We are in a coastal zone, so any impacts to the wetlands, which we will obviously try to minimize, will require full mitigation. There's an overhead transmission line that runs north-south through the site, which is shaded in sort of that purple color. We have a number of grand trees on the site, generally clustered in 3 different locations. Good news about the trees is they grade out very well. Most of them are Bs, a few Cs, which is really wonderful. The trees, having a health village is really about having a healthy site as well. And we know the importance of trees and flora and other things to contribute to that. So we're fortunate to have some very nice trees. So before you is the sketch plan. And the sketch plan is guided by a number of design principles. So the first one is really to be consistent with Charleston County's comprehensive plan. And so in order to do that, we will come before you asking to be rezoned as a planned development. The next design principle is nature first, to really focus on low impact design. And what we mean by that, in the case of the sketch plan and the way we're approaching this, is preserving as much of the natural site as possible, preserving as much of the tree cover, not just the grand trees, but all of the trees that we can, preserving as much of the wetlands as we can. So really having the site and the natural conditions of the site be a key part of the health and wellness village. The next design principle is really culture first and respecting the scenic highway that is Betsy Carrison. So there'll be a 75-foot buffer, undisturbed buffer along Betsy Carrison, and everything in the village will occur behind that. So basically, folks driving up and down Betsy Carrison, there will be one small window into the site where the main road comes in. Otherwise, you'll be looking at basically what you see today when you go by the site. The next principle is really about building with sustainability and resiliency and building a smart village, utilizing state-of-the-art technologies. Regarding parking, we only want to provide as much parking as the market demands. We don't want to create any more parking spaces than are necessary. We also are looking at employing off-site parking for employees so that the site parking spaces that are here are utilized by folks coming to take advantage of the services that are provided here. Regarding utility services, there is a sewer main that runs in Betsy Carrison that runs to Seabrook Island. And we would like to tie into that existing sewer line. And this would be consistent with County Ordinance 2078, which requires connection to existing sewer lines when they exist. The other option is to provide on-site treatment. And in this particular rendition of the sketch plan, you can see in the southeast corner, the green triangle indicating where the on-site treatment would occur. So regarding building and the buildings that would occur here, we'd like to consider using a height district that's consistent with what the city of Charleston currently uses. So the city of Charleston brought in the top sort of planning experts from around the country to look at their height ordinance. And the main thing that came out of that was that they are now determining height based on number of stories versus number of feet or amount of feet. And they deemed that that was really appropriate because it enables the architects to create better buildings, better design. So rather trying to squeeze things into a certain a number of feet, you actually do it based on number of stories. So that ends my part. We have some other members of the design team with me here tonight, including Jeff Webb with ADC Engineering, who is in charge of civil engineering, and Jennifer Beal, who is our traffic engineer and is undertaking our traffic study. So we're happy to answer any questions, but I think first I'm going to turn it over to Radia. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Radia Baxter, and I am originally from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, but I've been here in Charleston for 25 years. In that 25 years, I have done a lot of work dealing with community engagement, nonprofit management, and leadership development here in the Charleston community. I am a part of this team to provide community engagement strategies for the project for the medical village. A couple of things that we will be doing and that we have been doing is talking to residents in the surrounding Johns Island area in that area. We've also been talking, having listening sessions, going to neighborhood meetings. The biggest thing that we would like to do is do a community engagement workshop, letting our residents have input and be a part of our table so that way we can make this project go well. We know that lately in the world and in the United States and in our Charleston area, we've been dealing with health crisis as the pandemic. And so this gives us an opportunity to bring all communities, all community groups, diverse populations, different demographics to help us with this project. And so I am very elated and excited to be working with John and the crew on this project, and thank you for your time.
Okay. They're done.
Any questions or comments from commission members? Board?
The first speaker noted that envisaged services, a range of services, but will his services be unique? Are they the same services presently available, or he will be adding to them? I'd just be interested. Who might?
Thank you for the question. So we're looking to the community to help us answer some of those questions, but for example, we have done extensive research in some of the well-known universities of our nation, and healthcare is categorized typically in 14 different arenas. And I'll quickly go through this. so that we could understand what we're trying to offer the community. The first of which we're pretty much all aware of, which are ambulatory surgical centers. And these centers are also considered to be outpatient. Some are limited outpatient and some are full service. The second is birth centers. The third is blood banks, and these are where red blood cells carry oxygen and platelets to help blood clotting and plasma, which has been written about through the American Society of Hematology, and they serve a real purpose. The fourth category is clinics and medical offices. Then we have diabetes, education centers, and one of the things that Roddy and I have talked about extensively is our battles against diabetes, particularly here in the Low Country. There's over 31 million people that have this, and it's a real issue, and it does require treatment. We have dialysis centers that offers the ability to process and filter blood. Obviously, nursing homes and hospice centers, hospitals, which are a catch-all healthcare. Then we have imaging and radiology, mental health and addiction treatment centers, which is really an increasing need in our society. There's nursing homes that are defined by the National Care Planning Council. There's also orthopedic and rehabilitation centers that are needed. There's categories for urgent care, which are kind of your day-to-day for on-demand users and providers, and then there's telehealth. And so when we look at this and we take this to the community and then also our own experiences, we realize that some of the additions that are coming into our area are very much needed. I'm a huge proponent of supporting what some of the new announcements have been. In fact, I've supported the recent CON in the past couple of years. And where medical in a lot of areas start, as I mentioned earlier, healthcare and the trajectory for treatment and for wellness and healing, this all falls into a bucket of healing, really begins, and that could last for years. And so we want public input. We want to have an open dialogue that's respectful and meaningful for the community, so that we can incorporate this into what's best for our community. Thank you.
Pete?
If public sewer is available along Betsy Garrison, can I ask why the provision for the septic system?
Can you repeat the question without the mask on? I couldn't hear it at all.
Sure. With public sewer available along the Betsy Garrison frontage, I was just curious why making the alternative provision for the septic system.
Well, obviously, we would love to tie into the public service, sewer. But if, for whatever reason, or if there is a reason that we can't, we just wanted to study what it would take if we had to provide it on site, so that we're covering both of our options on that.
Along those lines, you don't seem to have cut back the amount of spaces that you're planning for, whether you do sewer or septic. Looks like the design is the same except for that one little triangle, and I don't see, I mean, going through the charts, I don't see where you're cutting back on any of the available space. So you think you can do the same thing?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. I probably didn't correct the numbers. If we use the corner down there for septic, then, yeah, the carrying capacity would reduce accordingly. So there would be less parking and less building.
Okay. You have a question? Suzanne?
Okay. I noticed in a lot of the residential comments in opposition to, a number of persons mentioned the wetland area and but earlier you mentioned, or the Dutch dialogue in your building proposal. I know you said that your buildings and structure are centered around the Dutch dialogue, but is that going to, does your reporting show that that's going to actually correct or worsen the flooding situation in this area? Because you're still close to the wetlands, and then some of the persons that are in opposition are very concerned about the flooding of that area, and that is wetland. There is a lot of wetland around there.
I don't know whether Jeff, yeah. Better at answering that question. So Jeff is our civil engineer.
Good afternoon. To speak to the wetlands on site, as we mentioned, we're preserving those to the maximum extent, and then in order to handle our stormwater that is really being developed upstream of the wetlands, we're going to have to do detention measures. We most likely wet ponds that will be additional volume upstream of those wetlands, because basically the way the rules are, we have to meet the pre-developed runoff that's coming from the site, and actually Charleston County has an ordinance for Johns Island that if it's considered a special protection area, which it is, we have to actually reduce the rate of runoff. So that increases the amount of stormwater storage that we've got to do on site. So,
But your plan doesn't show that, does it?
Right now, the concept is there with ponds roughly shown. If you look at the kind of pond areas that are kind of around the edges of the wetlands, those are intended to be new stormwater management, and with the wetlands beyond them remaining preserved.
And they meet the capacity that was designed by the Charleston County?
They will, yes, ma'am. It's not fully designed at this time, but we've done some preliminary sizing to make sure that we have enough area to get the volume that we need it. But it's going to have to meet all of Charleston County's requirements.
Okay. And the other question I have is that, because I've spoken with some of the people in the community as well in reference to this, and some of the concern also is that the encroachment upon residential areas. And when I look at your plan, I see you said you had a 75-feet buffer on Betsy Carrison, but then when I look at some of your plans, they're right in the backyard or cutting off a half of the backyard of the surrounding neighborhoods. And, excuse me, I'm trying to get back to the map. So, there's your plan. Did you make room or speak with those persons about encroachment into a residential area?
So what we're doing is we have a buffer that extends all the way around the entire property. And right now it's shown at 25 feet. So we're not encroaching on those residential properties. Everything that any disturbance to the property would occur behind that 25-foot undisturbed buffer.
Okay. And you met with the community and that was all right with them? Is that what you're saying too?
Yes, I mean, with the folks that we've met with, and we certainly have talked to the neighbors, the immediate neighbors behind us. Yes, ma'am. I mean, that seems to be appropriate.
Okay. I heard a little bit different, but I'll let them deal with that for right now. But, and so with this zoning, this rezoning from, was it R3 to PD?
Yes, ma'am, it'd be R4 to PD.
R4 to PD. And so that will allow you to do everything that you need to do here. And what about the impact study? What is it going to, what's going to happen traffic-wise? Because I think you said you have spacing for 515 parking. So you do have some in and out traffic there, and is that traffic going to spill over into the residential area at all?
No, ma'am. We have Jennifer Beal with Beal Engineering is working on the traffic study currently. And
I only see one driveway, or am I missing something here?
yeah, there's one entrance in the center of the site, and then there's another entrance on the northern portion of the site.
Okay.
And, you know, the site will generate trips because we're providing services that the
Yeah.
community, yes, ma'am. So, but the idea is that the trips are much shorter than they would be if folks had to drive to Charleston to get these services. So it will generate traffic, but hopefully it will take traffic off of the more rural roads on Johns Island, where folks currently are having to use those roads to get the medical services that they need.
My question regarding the PDD in general, my colleagues know I'm not a huge fan of PDDs. The mix of uses you're proposing here has a substantial amount of medical uses, 160,000 square feet, with some 20,000 square foot of commercial, 20,000 square foot of residential support. My assumption is that this project would go through in phases, because you're not going to populate 160,000 square feet of medical complex right away. I think a number of us have seen that PDDs often change their character over time and need to be amended. My biggest concern here is that you use a very compelling human interest story about the need for access to medical care as a back door to bring in the commercial and residential projects that are probably that could come in the future. And I think we want to make sure that there are safeguards in the PDD that kind of stipulate that. That's a suggestion I have.
Absolutely. And, you know, whatever safeguards are needed to assure that, you know, we're consistent with this vision, we're all for that.
The Army Corps has not yet done its mitigation study. I don't know, do you feel confident that in the light of that study, whatever it might be, that the plans that you've got here will remain very similar?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you
The
said.
Corps hasn't done its mitigation study yet, right?
No, they have not.
Okay. In the light of that study, which I gather could be a year or so away, do you envisage some change, much change to your plans here as?
The wetlands that are on there, and our wetlands consultant is not here today, so I'll okay, let Derek.
So to answer your question, the Corps has been on site and approved the wetlands delineation that was there. So the wetlands that are shown is an accurate representation and have been approved by the Corps. The wetlands are non-jurisdictional, so they're outside of the Corps' jurisdiction. However, any impacts to those wetlands will have to go through coastal zone consistency, which OCRM in that case would require mitigation for those impacts. So that has to go through, that goes through the coastal zone consistency process, and mitigation will be calculated based upon the impacts during that process. And most of the time OCRM will require using the Corps' standard operating procedure for calculating those mitigation credits.
And how does your plan stack up against the Dutch dialogues? You say you consider those, but other than putting in retention ponds, which...
Yeah, I would say in addition to the ponds, which are mainly a flood control measure, and again, it's we haven't gotten into the detailed design of it, but there is a desire to reduce runoff with pervious pavement or pavers wherever possible. We've also have talked about using cisterns or vaults to capture some roof drainage, and if not reuse it, it will at least store it, attenuate it during a storm event to release later. And so also wherever we're able to get some infiltration with bioswales or any natural areas that we can sheet flow drainage to, we're going to take advantage of that too.
Mr. Davis?
I was hoping somebody could expand on just briefly the off-site parking options for employees that y'all brought up.
So one of the things that are thinking about with that is that there's some existing parking lots nearby that basically are not being used most of the time. And so rather than having cars for employees that are parked on site here for 9 hours in the same space, same car, the thought is to take advantage of some off-site parking that's been already built and use the spaces here for patrons only, thereby minimizing the number of new spaces that would be added to Johns Island and minimizing the amount of new hard surfaces and being able to retain more of the site in its natural condition. So that's the idea behind utilizing the potentially off-site parking for employees.
Can you say where those are supposed to be? I don't know where they are.
Well, we're looking at some of the church sites that have parking, that's really only used on Sundays, for example.
Any other? Suzanne?
You said you incorporated the City of Charleston's plan for story versus feet. I've always had a little bit of a question about the use of that, because how tall is your story?
So what I mentioned is we would like you all to consider that. And again, in the city of Charleston, they have very specific numbers associated with the different stories. The city did, as I mentioned, they did an extensive amount of research and arrived at this way of addressing height. It was recommended both by the Preservation Society and the Historic Charleston Foundation that they do this. We just feel like there's some merit to the way that this has been approached. It does allow architects to potentially design with a little more freedom, which potentially results in better buildings. And so we'd like for the Planning Commission and the planning staff to consider that as a part of the PD.
Any other questions?
That really answered my question. Excuse me, Madam
We'll follow up.
Chairman.
If you wanna
Yeah,
do a follow-up, please
so
do.
because you're saying that the City of Charleston has their guideline, they invested some time
Yes,
and
ma'am.
money into coming up with their scale of heights for it. Is that height going to come in compliance with what Charleston County has approved of 35? What is it, 35 feet?
35 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Is your story going to be higher than that?
well, we would like to consider 3.5 stories, and it may be higher than 35 feet. But again, we have not put forward a specific set of numbers before the planning staff, or obviously before you all for your consideration. But we would like, to have you all consider that. What they were finding in the city of Charleston is that when they had height measured or dictated by number of feet, that oftentimes the architects and developers were trying to maximize the number of stories that they could get into a height limit. And what was resulting was buildings that had maybe
Okay.
floor-to-ceiling heights of 8 feet or something that really was not consistent with what a lot of people deemed to be quality architecture. But they were doing it simply because of that. That's what the number of feet was in the then current height regulation. It's really about having the freedom to design better buildings.
Is it going to make it safer? You say quality, but is that going to actually make it safer, or what is the difference? I guess I'm trying to understand what is it going to do out in this area if you go up a little bit higher and then the next person wants to come in and go a little bit higher, and then the next thing you know, we're looking at the top of palm trees out the window.
Right. So, I mean, this is the drawing that we put together. So, that's showing 3 stories and then a roof. Mm-hmm. And you look at the buffer along Betsy Carrison that's there. And so basically, the buildings are lower than the height of the trees that exist there. If it's 35 feet or 38 feet or 40 feet, I'm not sure that it makes that much difference in how it's perceived from the road. But I do believe architecturally, it can create a better structure for the folks that are living and working there or attending to get medical services there. And so it's really, it's an idea that we would like the planning staff and you all to consider.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak in favor of this project? Okay. Are there any members present who would like to speak in opposition? Come on up.
I won't be shy. My name's Rich Thomas. I live directly across the road from the proposed project. I'm gonna have to try to calm down a bit here because it makes me incredibly angry to have to even look at this. But I moved here 13 and a half years ago. Loved the rural feel of the area. And I actually went and talked to county staff, Mr. Jim Hauser, who was in the building department, I think, about the area, helped me understand, how things worked, what I could build, what might else be built in the area. And he was really good. I met with him a couple of times and gave me a lot of good information. Basically, it said, this is going to be a rural residential area, which is great. So this proposal is totally, absolutely inconsistent with the neighborhood and the area. I can't believe they're even here presenting this, but I understand why. Nobody is against this concept. Let's get that straight. Nobody is against the idea of providing medical care and all these sorts of things they talk about. The issue is where it's proposed to be located. It does not belong here. Planning Commission went through this with a very small little proposal just a couple hundred yards down the road, the putt-putt, that some people wanted to build there, again, in a residential area, and they ended up withdrawing that, and you all know the story on that thing. The main issue here is that there are multiple commercial nodes within a couple miles of this proposed facility. Freshfields is less than a half mile down the road. And there's hundreds of acres in the Freshfields area. And there was a proposal that came up a few months ago to develop back in behind the existing Freshfields. There's a retirement community going in. There's a big medical facility going in on Seabrook, again, less than a mile away. So nobody's against that, right? I mean, that's a commercial node. That's what it's for. It's been developed. There's area in there to do this. However, it would cost a lot more to do it there, but, that's how these things go. There's commercial nodes at the corner of River, Bohicket, Betsy Carrison, 2.5 miles up the road, where this could be developed as well. And it would accomplish a lot of the same goals that they're talking about, serving the community, reducing traffic, and that sort of thing. It belongs in one of those places to ease the pressure that we have in this area on development. And I know there's been talk among planning staff and the commission about making Betsy Carrison sort of a conservation corridor. And I think that would be, very consistent with what most of the residents want and how the development has historically happened here. So I'm adamantly opposed to this, and I'll get into a couple more reasons for it here. Ms. Baxter, who spoke, said she has been talking to residents and had listening sessions. I'm like, from here to you across the road, and I haven't spoken to her. She hadn't listened to me, so I don't know what that's about. I hope she does. She'll get an earful. This gentleman mentioned respectful and meaningful development for the community. There is nothing respectful about this for the community. This is incredibly disrespectful. And the only meaning it has to me is the destruction that I see going on with it. Getting into some of the technical issues here, the wetlands. Yes, ma'am.
Could you?
Yeah. Well, they spoke for several
Well, I know, but
minutes here.
there are a number of other people who want to speak after you.
The Dutch dialogues that actually used Johns Island as one of the study areas came up with a lot of recommendations that talked about building in wetlands. And this is a prime example of what they say you don't build in a place like this, or if you do, you do it a very specific way. This will be a fill and build development. They'll have to come in here and bring in several feet of fill dirt to get rid of the wetlands and then build their buildings and parking areas on it. Now, me being across the road on the marsh, I'm directly downhill. So I look at groundwater and I look at surface water, and this place is up here, I'm down here. Draw your own conclusions. I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you.
We'll get into it more later on, but thank you for listening.
Okay, who wants to speak next? And can we try to keep our remarks fairly brief, because there are a number of people who want to speak?
Madam Chairman, I'm going to ask if Mr. Evans can put his little timer on for us.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, how many minutes?
Why don't we start with 3, and if somebody's got really... Go ahead.
I'm Louise Bennett. I live on Resurrection Road.
Closer to the mic.
I am Louise Bennett. Is that fine now? I live on Resurrection Road. I also own and operate Rosebank Farms, which is directly, at least our retail business is directly across the street. We have been in business for 33 years now. We've seen a lot of changes, but Betsy Carrison does not need to become a commercial corridor. It is now bordered primarily by some very modest homes, which have been there for years. It is also bordered by more affluent homes and neighborhoods that are primarily hidden from view. There are 6 churches along the way, and there are 6 businesses, I believe, 2 of which are farm stands, 1 of which is mine. Pam Harrington across the street. All of the businesses are locally owned and operated by individuals or families. There are no corporate entities. The other three businesses are in, I guess, what we'd call the Hayward Complex, which is directly across from Resurrection Road. And this was started probably the late 50s or the very early 60s by the Hayward family, who still owns the buildings. And the three small businesses there are also family operated and are small. And as Rich Thomas just said, there are two available places for the medical center to be: at Fresh Fields at one end of the parkway and at the intersection of Bohicket River and Betsy Carrison at the north end. Today was the first that I'd heard of a sewage treatment plant, or whatever one wants to call it, in my front yard and other people's backyards, and that is appalling. And I know I don't speak just for myself, but I speak for a lot of other people, both black and white, who didn't sign up to speak today. Thank you.
My name is William Baker. I live at 3320 Hopkinson Plantation Road, about 400 feet from where this development's going to be, directly across the street from Betsy Carrison. We're a 9-lot subdivision. I happen to be the secretary and treasurer of that subdivision. 6 of the 9 lots and homes in that subdivision were just purchased within the last 2 years. 100% of us purchased those properties with the knowing that this was a R4 zoned area, and we expect the residential section from the commercial nodes at River and Bohicket down to Freshfields to be secured as residentials as they're presently zoned. When I was listening to this presentation, I learned quite a bit. I'm glad I came. One of the things I learned is that they're going to try to tie into the Seabrook Island sewage. Our subdivision tried to tie into the Seabrook Island sewage. That's right there in front of our neighborhood. We were denied access to Seabrook Island sewage. They said their property is at 11, 12, 13, 14 feet. Our property is at 8 to 10 feet. You know where water goes? It goes downhill. To this gentleman's comment about a PD, what assurance could they provide in putting language in, because this is going to be a long-term development? The only assurance, I'm 58 years old, I've seen a lot of PDs. The only assurance I've ever seen work and adhered to is the one that's never designated to begin with, because they all change. Off-site parking, that was a good one. You know where the off-site parking is located? Freshfields, down at Betsy Carrison and River Road, where the 2 commercial nodes are. There's already existing medical in those 2 commercial nodes. That's where this type of development is supposed to be. There's physical therapy down at Betsy Carrison and River Road. There's psychological counseling down there. At the other end, at Freshfields, there's a doctor's office, there's a dentist, there's an MUSC facility that's just been approved and we built upon and we'll be building next year. We don't need this on Betsy Carrison. It needs to go into a commercial node, not in an R4 zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Go.
I'm Dick Van Adden. I live in Keel River Estates, which is going to be abutted by this development. This is the first I've ever heard of this. Talk about community outreach and stuff. I talked to some of my other neighbors, and the lack of knowledge is amazing. So the first question is, if there's been a community outreach, how come KRE doesn't know about it? You might have talked to 1 or 2 people. I don't know who was talked to, but I am appalled at hearing something of this scale and scope going into this area, which is, as others have already said, inappropriate. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of people say, okay, how about fresh fields? We already had some problems with the issue of expanding fresh fields and the plans of development there changing from R4 to PD. And that was vehemently opposed by the community. And that was canceled. We heard about the putt-putt. What we don't understand here is why someone wants to take a scale and scope which is pretty much undefined here in terms of numbers of offices, numbers of patients, numbers of people who would be taken care of here, and put it on the end of an island, when in fact the real needs would be island-wide. We've heard about these problems. And that's why people are saying there's alternative places to put this. It's not a bad idea. We may need more medical services, but how it impacts on the very character and scale and scope of where we are needs to be taken into consideration. I don't think you can deal with the traffic issues appropriately and the cars coming in and out. We had as you may all know, one of our residents was killed coming out of KRE on Betsy Carrison because of the traffic and the speeds. This is not the right place to put this, and I certainly urge you to look at alternatives. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, come on.
Short people. My name is Glenda Miller. I live at 3377 Cottage Plantation Road. So I'm at the end of Bohicket, where it joins Betsy Carrison, one of our commercial nodes. I've been active in the community for years. My primary concern here is the flooding. I've seen flood maps, drainage maps prepared by a College of Charleston professor that causes me a lot of concern. If they have to go with fill and build, that looks like it'll be flooding other areas adjacent to it, Kiowa River Estates, etc. I oppose the zoning change. When someone buys property, they know what it's zoned for, what the allowable uses are, and then they want us to change that so that they may pursue business endeavors, whereas we would really like to preserve more of our land and our culture and our heritage, especially on the lower end of Johns Island. So I support the concept, but if they really want to help the most number of people, I would even suggest the Maybank Highway area. That will be the only way you're going to draw from the north end of the island, excuse me, Guatemala, and the south end of the island. And as far as off-site parking for employees, I understand MUSC is having a difficult time recruiting for its proposed medical facility. So if you can even get some employees, good luck talking them into parking off-site. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak?
Hi, I'm Susan Hayward, and I just want to make a statement that clearly put my position out there, and that is that I strongly feel that the area is already zoned residential. And I can't breathe. The area is already zoned as residential, and I am a proponent that it should remain that way. I'm having some horrible back pains, and I am currently in physical therapy. I am in physical therapy at Island Physical Therapy, which is on the corner of Maybank Highway and Bohicket Road. And that's the area that has been already identified zoning-wide for this kind of project. And I do appreciate the fact that I didn't have to drive all the way to Roper St. Francis to get the physical therapy. And I would agree that we could use the medical facility, but the medical facility needs to be put in a zoning area that is already designed for business. I just think it's critical that we protect the areas that are designed for homes, because when we take away the opportunities for those areas to remain designed for homes, it impacts families. It impacts people's lives. And the developers just come in with their own agenda, not realizing that you're disrupting families. Thank you.
Want to speak? Jason? All people.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jason Crowley, Communities and Transportation Director with the Coastal Conservation League. I want to take a minute to thank you all for having this workshop, because this is the exact point, to be able to take a time to hear the presentation, get the feedback from the community, and understand if this is the right direction. And having this opportunity without having a vote at the end of it, it is exactly why it's so important to have these opportunities to do these sort of workshops, because I think what we're all hearing is important. And Johns Island and Johns Islanders for a long time have really been prioritizing planning and smart growth, and identifying the best places for growth, and identifying the areas that are risky for future development. That was the whole point of the Dutch dialogues that the city of Charleston did. That was the point of the urban growth boundary and the zoning. And here we're in a really tricky place, because the urban growth boundary goes right on the edge. And so this property would be built right on the edge of the urban growth boundary. And across the street, you have a predominantly and historically African-American settlement area. Right in the center of this property, there was an image on the map that kind of looked like Pac-Man eating a family compound that are African-American families right there. But what came out of that was residential zoning, and that was why residential zoning was identified in this area for moderate suburban growth to balance out the more rural area outside the boundary on the other side of the road. And as you've been hearing, there are places and opportunities to have this sort of use on this island. And this is a large island, and there's a need to have a mixture of uses to make sure it doesn't become a bedroom community. And when we talk about resilience, the most resilient place for a use like this is in the center of the island on the Maybank corridor. And we encourage the applicant to look at other sites that could be more suitable for this area, places where we have a population density, where we have the infrastructure already in place. Maybank corridor already has sewer and water. It also has the elevation. It's 20 feet and higher above sea level. So that is a place where we should be growing. That happens to also be in the city of Charleston, because that's the situation it is. But the southern end of the island has always been this place where we have some of the last vestiges of the farms. We have Rosebank Farms is exactly downstream from where the stormwater would be draining out to. Imagine putting a commercial use that drains its stormwater into one of the last farms on this side of the road. This is a place where we have a lot of beautiful grand trees. We'd have to cut the barrier of Betsy Carrison, that median, in order to have a turn lane come into this property, which currently you have to go all the way down and come back up around. So this would be a pretty major impact to this area, the feeling, the culture, the identity, the uses. And I think what we're hearing today is that this is a property or a project and a proposal that needs to go back to the drawing board, look at a more suitable place, or look at a much more toned down use on this site than what's being proposed today. And I just want to thank you all for, again, having the opportunity for this workshop.
Hello, my name is Francis Nelson Jr., and I live at 4375 Betsy Carrison Parkway. I actually live right behind where they're going to be doing this development. And at first, they did come to me and ask what I was thinking about it. And I said, yeah, I think it would be a pretty good idea, because I'm dealing with health issues myself. But then I thought about it. I think it's going to be too much traffic. I think it's going to be too much development. I think it's just piss poor planning for them with parking and with the sewage. And I think it's just going to disturb my peace, my paradise that we live back there. I also got neighbors, and I think it's just going to be just a little bit too much traffic, just too much on us, and it's just going to. My parents also live right across the street, so I think it's just going to take away too much of Bessie Harrison Parkway, and I think it's going to mess up just a little bit of our peace and serenity, and I think they just need to try to have it somewhere else. And thank you.
Anyone else? Pam?
Hi, Pam Skinner, Fairview Plantation Road on Wamala Island, and I'm here to speak because I have problems with PDs as well. They, as you know, you've had the Kiowa River PD before you with multiple amendments, so they never stay. And I'm glad I came today because I guess even looking through all the documents that were provided previously, I had no idea they were asking for 3.5 stories. I can't imagine driving down Betsy Harrison and seeing 3.5 stories. And like everyone else has spoken so eloquently, much better than I do, that there are other places for this. There is a need for this. And so I'd like to call out what I thought was one of the slides that says how many residents are in Kiowa River, on Kiowa Island, and in the town of Seabrook Island. Nowhere, they have a community liaison or whatever, but nowhere do they put the Johns Island population, and where could that be served? I thought that was kind of telling and a little bit disingenuous, is that they're trying to reach out to the community that's here. And also, I had the sewer, I had the same thing, and the town of Seabrook Island has that sewer, and they wouldn't even let the town of Kiowa tap in when they built their town hall there, so I don't see where that's coming from. And that was basically what I was just, I'm so here to support Mrs. Coaxum and her settlement community, the Freeman, she's part of the Freeman family that had 13, her father raised 13 children on the island, and they've just been a very near and dear to me, so is Louise Bank and Rosebank Farms. So I just wanted to support that I'm adamantly opposed to this PD as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Zlogar with the Johns Island Task Force. Can't quite get this. Just a couple of things. I mean, you've heard a lot from the community here, and I'm glad we found one person that they actually talked with, so that was really cool. Because there were people next door and so forth that they haven't talked to, and you would have thought before they spent a lot of money and hired a lot of folks to come and sit here in this meeting, they would have at least talked with more than one person. This really is a mega development. I don't know how else to call it. And, with all due respects, the architect said he wanted higher elevations because of the city. And I think that's really telling. He wants it to look like the city, right? This would look great in West Ashley or even Maybank Highway. But the fact that you're using the city as a reference point for what should be the character of Johns Island, I think is very telling in terms of what this developer wants to do and the other folks. Putt-putt mentioned. This is nothing but another putt-putt, okay? Really, when you get down. You can have all the heart-tugging stories you want. At the end of the day, this is putting a commercial development in a residential zone. And yes, there's a little farm stand that's commercial here, and there's a little restaurant that's commercial here, which is all within the Johns Island vernacular. This belongs in the city. Even the architect says it belongs in the city because this is the way they do it in the city. Community outreach. I'll be tell you one thing. I actually did meet the community outreach person. I was offended because we had a private meeting, and that person crashed that meeting without telling us and just came in. It's like, I'm sorry, that's not the way you do community outreach. And finally, stormwater and septic. This is proposed to be, what was it? I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 square feet, whatever it was, medical facilities. Not just anything, medical facility. Think about all the medical waste that was going to be put down these septic tanks and everything else, and that's going to end up on who knows where, and it's going to end up in Rosebank Farms stand and so forth. In the long term, this is the worst place to put such an intensive mega development let alone a medical development. Lots of good places to do. I agree with Mr. Crowley. Maybank Highway would be towards the center of the population. It would be a great place to do it, and we're all for that. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? From commissioners? There's no further discussion from commission members. The Planning Commission workshop stands adjourned. The Planning Commission will hold its next regularly scheduled meeting on Monday, December 13th, 2021 at 2 p.m. in council chambers. Thank you, Joel. Did I take that long?
It's over.
Okay. Adjourned.
Yeah.